Hello everybody and welcome back to Punting Pioneer. I'm Corbin Hosler and this is Izzet Ensoul. This is a sweet one. It's got to say, as far as Pioneer goes, this is one of the most unique decks you will ever see. I know we just had a big shakeup to the format with all of the bans, and look, while everyone's looking for the most broken thing they can do, whether that's Wilderness Reclamation, or Uro, or ramping, or going aggro, or whatever it is, there's something that maybe those people haven't considered. Have they thought about playing a 1-1 for 1? Because we've got plenty of them, and that is what we're doing this week. Izzet Ensoul, Bomat Courier. It's a 1-1 for 1. So is Gingerbrute. But what we're going to do is we're going to play these value 1-drops that are, in fact, artifacts. Gingerbrute can make it so it can't be blocked except by creatures with haste. The Bomat Courier can sacrifice itself to draw some cards, but they're artifacts, and that means that we can use Ensoul Artifact to turn them into 5/5s. We can use Skilled Animator to turn them into 5/5s. That includes our Hope of Ghirapur, the 1-1 flyer for 1. I forgot to mention this one here. We can also sacrifice it to mess up our opponents. Now, we have more. We have Shrapnel Blast. This is an oldie but a goodie here in Pioneers. Additional cost to cast this spell. Second artifact deals 5 damage to any target. That means it can be removal. It can go upstairs to the face for 5 points of damage. That's what this deck is trying to do. We've got Stonecoil Serpent. That could be an early drop, or it can just be a massive mana sink late. Emry allows you to replace some of these value artifacts out of your graveyard. And then in addition to the Ensoul artifacts and the Skilled Animators turning our stuff into 5/5s, we have access to this old Shadowspear here, which is a heck of a magic card you might have forgotten if you haven't lost to it lately in Throne of Eldraine Limited. It is powerful. And, of course, we have Ghostfire Blade, which can make our colorless creatures get +2/+2 for very cheap, everybody. That's the deck. Basically, it's straightforward. It's going to attack people. It's Ensoul Artifact. It's existed around Pioneer for a while, but now might be the time for it to make a real resurgence in the metagame. We round the deck out here. As you see our lands, we've got access to Mutavault, even Darksteel Citadel. By the way, you can turn into a creature, make indestructible 5/5s. And the Stubborn Denial and Wild Slash, both of these just work well with the deck and do what you need them to do, either removal or protection for what you're up to, everybody. The sideboard, pretty straightforward here. We've got access to some counter magic in different ways. We've got Abrade. We've got the Aethersphere Harvester when we want some life gain, Lava Coil for more removal as well, and then Dive Down if we really want to protect our creatures against a bunch of fatal pushes. Izzet Ensoul, everybody, one of the more unique net magic decks I think you will ever see. This is an old Magic Origins-esque standard deck that has now found its way into Pioneer, and it's really a cool mashup of different time periods of Magic, and that's why I'm looking forward to playing it for you all this week. Let's jump into the games. All right, here we go. Izzet Ensoul. We are on the play, and remember what I said about indestructible 5/5s? Yeah, we might have an opportunity to get that done here. We are going to lead on this Ghostfire Blade, but look, we're going to play the Darksteel Citadel on turn 2. We're going to have access to the Wild Slash should we need it, and then on turn 3, we're going to slam this Skilled Animator, and we're going to turn something into a 5/5 here. I've actually, we'll see how this plays out. I'm considering a lot of different things, frankly. This is very good. This is what we want to set up for. Now, remember, though, our opponent can kill the Skilled Animator to stop the creature from, the artifact from being a creature. So I'm actually considering a couple different lines here. Like, what if we just played the Stonecoil Serpent for 2? Well, heck, I guess we play it for 1, and then you put the Ghostfire Blade on it. It's that, or play it for 2. I think I like putting the Ghostfire Blade on it. Then next turn, we can try to turn it into a 5/5. Yeah, this is what we're going to do here. And if this is the case, heck, maybe I should have played it on turn 1. But I think this will still work. We turn this into a 3/3, which is nothing to, nothing to laugh at. But yeah, I guess we should have played this on turn 1, figuring this deck out as we go. But now we have the Skilled Animator on turn 3 to turn this into a 5/5 if our opponent does anything except something weird like this. Trial of Ambition, making us sacrifice our Stonecoil Serpent. That is a clean answer to it. Well, here's the thing. We need to play the Skilled Animator this turn, and I think we're supposed to deal damage to our opponents. I think we're just going to hit the Ghostfire Blade. It's not indestructible, but it does allow us to just get in for 5 points of damage here. And look, we're sitting on 9 points of burn in our hand. So when you consider that, we're literally only 6 points away. That's one attack step away with what we have on board. Obviously, we'll see what our opponent's up to here, but there's a lot of burn right here. But if it doesn't get anywhere by pointing it at their face, it pretty much doesn't get anywhere at all. But I'll tell you, look at this. Our opponent playing the Narset, getting the value, going digging, finding another Trial of Ambition. That's not bad, but it's not going to be good enough. We have lethal right now. Yep, sure do. Watch this. This is going to be neat. Okay, let's start by attacking for 6. Attack with all creatures. Attack our opponent. This puts him down to 9. All right, now you say, how can you get 4 mana with his Spirebluff Canal in your hand? That doesn't work, but you know what does work? Sacrificing this here Darksteel Citadel to hit our opponent for 5. Oh, by the way, now we only have 2 lands in play. Spirebluff Canal, untapped, 2 points to your face, friend, and 2 points more. That's a win with Izzet Ensoul right there. That is why you play this deck. Woo, look at that. Okay. Well, it looks like we're up against Esper Control here. Let's get the Mystical Disputes. The Dive Downs and the Spell Pierces in here. Although, Spell Pierce is definitely probably better than Dive Down if our opponent's playing sacrifice effects like that Trial of Ambition. So, what do we want to do here? Yeah, frankly, the Wild Slashes are, despite winning us that game, in pretty convincing fashion, as a matter of fact, though. Probably not exactly what we're looking for here. Probably don't need the Shadowspear either. What do we want to cut? Maybe a Ghostfire Blade. I'm going to be greedy, probably. Cut a land, too. I'm kind of thinking about it. Not sure. I haven't played this deck. Cutting a land is probably excessively greedy. So maybe we won't do that. Maybe instead we'll just cut down on... What's this do? Alright, until your next turn, target player who is dealt combat damage by the Hope can't cast non-creature spells until your next turn. So the idea is you hit with this in combat, and then you can do whatever you want in your second main phase. But frankly, in this deck, I think it's just being used as a 1/1 flyer. I think if we're cutting one here, it's probably just the dive down. Like, I guess don't go with the dive downs. Maybe they're a little better on the play than on the draw. We'll have a little more mana available. That was a sweet game 1, though. Now, if you watch my Mighty Modern videos from last week, we played Neo Brand, which is just the wildest Modern deck around. And we let things off. Match 1, game 1. Turn 1, kill. It was incredible. Now, we had a hard time winning games after that as a Glass Cannon, but it's a fun deck. And that's kind of how this game felt. We come right out of the gates. We show what the deck is capable of. Getting the beatdown on in a game, by the way, that I may not have even played all the way correctly. We still had a very impressive win there on turn 4. So, what do we do here? I have to say, double Bomat. I mean, this hand, honestly, on the draw, it looks okay to me. Now, yeah, it's 1 land. I get it. But we can cast 3 spells. And the Bomat can dig us to others if our hand is just absolute trash. But look, we just hit 1 land like that, and all of a sudden things look great. So, let's do it. Yeah, frankly, I think that's a very nice play because now we get to start swinging in with the Bomat. Our opponent putting that Godless Shrine into play tapped, meaning even if they have Fatal Push, they're still going to get hit. They're still getting a card underneath the Bomat. This is something eventually they're going to have to care about. And next turn, we have a second one with Stubborn Denial, or we can just play an Ensoul Artifact and get to work. Now, our opponent definitely looking like they're holding up Fatal Push this time around. That's a nice draw, though, right there. I think I'm going to play it a little slower for a couple reasons. One, our opponent probably has removal here. I don't want to just go for an Ensoul Artifact on my Bomat. What I do want to do is use the Ensoul Artifact or these Skilled Animators on this Darksteel Citadel. And for that reason, I want to go ahead and just put the pressure to our opponent with these Bomats, kind of make them think about it, right? They're going to have to either burn removal on them, or they're just going to get poked. It's good against them making us sacrifice creatures. We have the Stubborn Denial up. We have the Ensoul Artifact on the Darksteel Citadel next turn. We got Skilled Animators for days. I mean, this hand looks like it's doing all right here. Now, we have to remember the Stubborn Denial, unlike every time you've ever had this card cast against you in Modern, For us, we do not have the Ferocious here, so we can't counter that outright. However, we can Force Spike it, and a Force Spike here is probably good enough. Or we let it resolve, because no, this doesn't. The Narset doesn't allow us to draw extra cards. The Bomat actually doesn't do that. What the Bomat Courier does is puts them into your hand, so they don't interact. Our opponent gets to dig. I think I let this resolve. I think next turn I play Ensoul Artifact on the Darksteel Citadel. Maybe. Maybe not. The thing is, I desperately want to keep open the Stubborn Denial here. And my opponent, well, that's actually good to know. They got a Supreme Verdict. The Mutavault is a pretty decent draw. Alright, so our opponent has Supreme Verdict, but here's the thing. I just want to make him play Supreme Verdict next turn. I'm just going to play Ensoul Artifact on my Darksteel Citadel, because Supreme Verdict doesn't beat that, friends. It will be indestructible. And frankly, if they spend 4 mana to deal with the 2 mana we put on the Bomats, who cares, right? Ensoul Artifact right here. Now we have to figure out what to do about the Narset. My deck doesn't really draw extra cards, so I kind of don't care. I just don't want them to get another card off of it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the Darksteel Citadel at my opponent and the Bomats at the Narset, just putting it down to 1. I think, and I could be wrong here, I think we are okay letting them have a Narset on 1 loyalty, but I don't think we want to miss the opportunity to just 5 them, right? Put them at 10, especially because, look, our deck does damage in chunks of 5 with these Skilled Animators and Shrapnel Blast and Ensoul Artifacts and things like that, but now we've really put the screws to our opponent here. If they, and they don't even have it. If they had the land there, they have to play the land. Yeah, that's very rough for them, frankly. Let's move to combat here. They were going to have to play the land, shock, go down to 8. That doesn't even do anything. They're at 3 once they get hit. That's not where they wanted to be, but they didn't even have a 3rd land, so I have to, or a 4th land rather, so I have to say, things looking all right for us here. No Settle the Wreckage that I can think of in our future. Our opponent is at least letting us put Bomat Courier triggers onto the stack. We'll see what their answers look like, but we've got a decent follow-up here. Now, Eliminate. I can hard counter this if I wanted to. However, honestly, I see no reason to. They're spending 2 mana to remove a 1/1. Remember what I said? We're going to play 1/1s, and our opponent is going to care about them. That's why they're taking 6 right here, falling to 4. So, all right. I mean, I thought about firing up the Mutavault there, but I wasn't sure what sort of the world was going to look like after, and I didn't know if I might want to be able to do everything here, including pop the Bomat. So I think what I'm going to do is play the Hope of Ghirapur here off of the Mutavault. This, again, just it puts something into play, makes our opponent worry about it. We turn it into a 5/5 should we need to. But now we get to pass the turn back, and we have both the Stubborn Denial with Ferocious, so we have a hard counter spell here, sort of against anything but that Supreme Verdict, but we have the Supreme Verdict covered anyways. And if should we want, we can even activate our Bomat Courier here. So we have 7 power in play. Our opponent is at 7 life. If they shock with this Hallowed Fountain they drew, they're down to 5. They die to the Darksteel Citadel. I told you indestructible 5/5s were pretty good in Modern, and when people aren't comboing you out, they look really strong. Izzet Ensoul, everybody, just taking it. Desperate Control right there. That was a great intro to this deck. This is a fun one. I like this a lot. Let's jump right into another game, see if we can pick up another win. Time for more Izzet Ensoul, and I have to say, this looks like a keeper to me. We've got the protection, we've got the creatures, we've got the mana, even a Mutavault here to help us out in the long game. What do I want to lead with? That's the question. Our opponent showing Castle Vantress. That could mean a whole bunch of things right now. It means they don't have a play on turn 1, I guess. So probably more likely to be a control deck than a tempo deck. If you look at it that way, that or they just have a very awkward hand. I think I lead with the Shivan Reef. I think this is okay. Maybe it's just the Mutavault, but I'm not positive. And just play our Bomat and get to work here. Bomat's so good to start off with. It just, against decks that don't have a bunch of creatures, you know, against your Mana Dork decks, right, when someone can just throw a Llanowar Elves in front of it, it's not as good. But in all other situations here, against a deck like this, that is not going to put a lot of board presence out early, at least that we've seen so far, Bomat Courier just becomes this card advantage threat in the late game that forces people to deal with it. It's a really nice design, and Shrapnel Blast is not a bad pickup. So let's move to combat here. Trigger number 2 down on the Bomat. Not that it matters in the sense that, you know, it's still going to be a minute before we sort of do anything with that, right? But it is a long-term threat, right? It's building up, it's charging up. Basically, what I'm saying is Bomat Courier is the Spirit Bomb of Pioneer. All right, that was a deep cut. I'm sorry. I'm not even proud of that one. All right, let's see what our opponent does here. It's 3 mana, blue-white control, passing the turn back. Okay. Well, and this is where well, that's an interesting draw, actually, drawing that Gingerbrute. What do I want to do here? I would say it's a bit of a tell at this point if I think I'm not scared of 3 mana plays, though. I think maybe I play Steam Vents and I just go ahead and shock it in. Just activate the Mutavault and swing. It's that, or we just play the Gingerbrute and swing, keeping open Stubborn Denial. However, if we're going to get Supreme Verdicted, that play isn't great. So I actually think we're going to try to... Because the turn after that, with 4 mana, if my opponent were to play Verdict, I want to play Gingerbrute and Skilled Animator. So I think this is the line. This is obviously a bit of a tell that we're shocking in this Steam Vents, but a tell to what? I mean, what's our opponent going to do? Not cast their cards? And anything other than Supreme Verdict, we have under control a little bit. So we'll see what happens here, but... We get into the beatdowns here, 5 damage, nothing, like, our deck deals damage in chunks of 5, seemingly no matter what we do. I don't want to play the Gingerbrute second main phase, I want to keep it in my hand. If my opponent has a Supreme Verdict that I cannot interact with here, I want to go Gingerbrute, Skilled Animator, clock you for 5, and you have it, there you go, it's the Supreme Verdict. Could trade these cards in for the 3 underneath the Bomat, definitely not worth it in this case. And now we move right along, folks. It's like we never stopped attacking. Skilled Animator, make the Gingerbrute a 5/5. Send 5 at you, friend. Now, see that Castle Ardenvale over there? If the Castle Vantress wasn't bad enough, Castle Ardenvale making 1/1s, not so bad against our deck. So we very, very much have to be the aggressors here. And truthfully, our shields are kind of down right now. We're sending in the Gingerbrute. We're getting our 5 damage in, putting them to 8. But say they just slam a Teferi Hero Dominaria or something here, minus on our Skilled Animator, perhaps, or on our Gingerbrute for that matter, leave us with a 1-power creature either way. They have some plays available to them here. This is where hopefully the Mutavault comes in handy. There, just casually calling every card that they're going to cast this entire game. That's all. 2 for 2. 2 for 2. Now, hopefully they don't cast anymore. Hopefully they just die. And if they're going for the draw card option here on Teferi, I would think that bodes pretty okay for us because this math works out like this, friends. We swing with everything, including our Mutavault here. Our opponent goes for removal on the Gingerbrute. Well, we send it for 5 at their face anyways with the Shrapnel Blast. The Skilled Animator and the Mutavault get in for 3 points of damage. That's lethal. We're going to have Stubborn Denial backup, of all things. So, I have to say, feeling pretty good about this one. I say Stubborn Denial backup. I guess that's not quite true. We get to cast one or the other, but that's perfectly fine. Because this is lethal no matter how you look at it. So we'll just send the 8 points of damage at them. And if they did have removal here, say a Seal Away or something, Stubborn Denial gets them. An Opt, of course, not even a card we have to worry about. So I have to say, sometimes you put a lot of thought into what you're going to do, and it doesn't work, or you misclick anyways, you fail. Look, it's Punting Pioneer. I do that all the time. But very rarely, you know what your cards, your opponents are going to have. You play around them perfectly, and you crush them because of it. And that's why we're off to game 2 here. All right, blue-white control. I see ya. These Spell Pierces in here for sure. Mystical Disputes. Definitely want those. I really like picking up game 1 against a control deck like this. Especially I think we were on the draw. I'm not positive. All right, the Wild Slash is probably not what we need. Don't need to send points at their, excuse me, at their Planeswalkers that way. Same with the Ghostfire Blades and the Shadowspear. Trample and Lifelink, but not Haste. Yeah, I don't really think we're going to need that. Shadowspear, a little more important against decks that put out a bunch of blockers. Maybe not quite as important against a blue-white opponent now. This looks like a hand I'm in for. Couple Mystical Disputes, only one creature, and being on the draw that can be a little bit problematic. As a matter of fact, well, we'll see what happens here, but see what we draw. There's a couple different ways we could go about this turn. This turn, I mean, it's turn one, but what I mean is a couple different ways we could play this game here. I can just slam the Gingerbrute. I could play the Ghostfire Blade. Then on turn two, play the Gingerbrute, attach it. That doesn't expose the Gingerbrute to removal. At no point do I have Mystical Dispute open in any of that, though. But if we decide I don't need to dispute any, really don't need to dispute any 2 or 3 mana plays from our opponent, that might be okay. This is going to be a tough one. I think the answer is just play the Gingerbrute, though. I think we just do it, and we sort of exhaust our opponent's first line of interaction, whatever that looks like. And then we hope to lean on these Mystical Disputes and this Skilled Animator animating one of these Ghostfire Blades to finish it off. I don't think this Gingerbrute's going to go the distance, but it does get the party started. If you remember back to that Throne of Eldraine trailer, I don't know if I'd call it a party, but Garrick seemed to be having a good time. Alright, so here we go. Our opponent doing nothing so far, and now we have the first real decision point of the match. I either play a Ghostfire Blade and keep up a Mystical Dispute, or I play and equip a Ghostfire Blade. Or now that we've drawn a second Gingerbrute, I play the second Gingerbrute, keep up Mystical Dispute. I don't think that is the line. I'm not convinced that the line is throwing the Ghostfire Blade on it either, but that is what I'm going to do. Maybe. I say that. You know what? Maybe that's just overly greedy. Because I have 2 Mystical Disputes, I'm going to save this in case our opponent has a Supreme Verdict, but I'm going to try here, and I didn't even make this decision until I'd cast a spell, but I'm going to try to just always hold up Mystical Dispute. I think that's the game I want to play. We're going to go a little slower. We have the tools to last into the late game, a couple counter spells, not just one. The Ghostfire Blades can pump any small creatures. The Ghostfire Blades can themselves become 5/5s. With the Skilled Animator, let's just always have Mystical Dispute up and see what happens. Land is what we're looking for, though. Third Mystical Dispute, not quite. But I guess we at least get to start trying here. Now, imagine if we had a second land here. We would have a Mystical Dispute for our turn against whatever our opponent's going to do here. And the dispute on their turn. Because at some point, you know, I can... Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'll Zorish. I got 3 of them. It just tells me a couple things, I guess. One, my opponent using this Azorius Charm here to try to get my Gingerbrute to not take 3 damage. I guess that's how I want them to spend their third turn, basically, is what I'm saying. We spend the 1 damage on the Mystical Dispute, get through. Now, what are they going to do on 4? Play a Supreme Verdict? I'm not sure what they're going to slam on 4. I'm completely terrified of. I'm sure I'm about to find out. But generally, it's the 5-drops that are a little more problematic. Look at that, though. Our opponent just actually passing the turn back. I guess we just keep getting in there for 3. I mean, not for nothing. Our opponent down to 13. This could put him to 10. It doesn't look like much, but it is getting the job done turn after turn, forcing our opponent to care, essentially. And now they want to go for another Azorius Charm. Gonna counter this one too, I think. As long as they care about my Gingerbrute, I care about my Gingerbrute. As long as I have backup Mystical Disputes anyways. But the problem, like I said, with missing the lands here is this only lasts for so long, right? We have all these cards in our hand. And at some point, holding up these Mystical Disputes and not being able to cast a Gingerbrute or Hope of Ghirapur is going to come back to bite us. We're doing a great job here fighting over this silly little Gingerbrute with a Ghostfire Blade on it, always holding up Mystical Disputes, really kind of making our opponent spend their turn trying not to take damage and then taking damage anyways. But they are making land drops and we are not, and generally a blue-white deck is going to make much better use of their land drops than we're going to try to catch up after that. So we have 1 Mystical Dispute left. Let's hope it's a good one. Opponent could be trying to pull the trigger on... You know, they've tried 2 Azorius Charms that haven't worked at this point. And now, once again, it looks like they're going to pass the turn back. Now, I'm begging for our deck to service up a land right here. Not quite. Alright, to combat we go. Land would have made this game so much easier. I would have actually been able to add to my board. In addition to messing with these Azorius Charms for my opponent, I'd actually be putting things into play. Instead, as it stands, this is finally a turn that I can put something into play while still holding a Mystical Dispute. We're going to run out of Hope of Ghirapur. Helpful if our next draw is exactly Shrapnel Blast, I guess. Our opponent wants to absorb it, huh? Well, the fact of the matter is I have to let that resolve because I have to have a Mystical Dispute for the Teferi. So Hope of Ghirapur down, but hey, I guess it got a card out of our opponent. Land. Give me a land. That is a land. All right. So the thing is, with now hitting this third land and a Mutavault at that, pretty important, our opponent missed a land drop too, which means we're not falling so far behind. They're still at 10 life, back down to 7 it looks like now. But things are starting to look okay for us here. This is a big one, I think, for us to be able to keep adding to the board, putting this Ghostfire Blade down, having that third land for the Skilled Animator with our opponent at 7 life. 7 is not a lot of lives. Not very many. And now we get to pass the turn back with Mystical Dispute open yet again. Our opponent coming for something on the instep here. Is it a Brazen Borrower? They dig through time. I'm countering this. Well, I drew all 3 Mystical Disputes. Let's hope I use them on the right things. Because our opponent's at 7 and our shields are down. That said, I can beat Teferi. Teferi minus on my Gingerbrute, dice on my Mutavault. So that's one of the reasons I feel comfortable going for that. And also if my opponent is spending their 5th turn playing a dig through time and not an answer to our board, that's not where they want to be. Like I said, there's the Teferi. I can't beat the Teferi, but I might just kill my opponent. I say I can't beat the Teferi. I can't counter to the Teferi, rather. We gave that up. But what are they going to do? Minus here, lose it to the Mutavault, get hit for a billion anyways? You know, not a ton of great options for them with this Teferi. You can plus the Teferi, then you're actually dead. I just have lethal if that's the case. So, yeah, looks like they're going for it here. Gingerbrute down, but that's good for us. Land? Alright, not a land. So, I can't kill my opponent. As much as I wish I could, I cannot. So, instead we're going to play it a little safer here. I could get 5. I could get them for 5. But what I'm actually going to do is fire up the Mutavault. Send the lowly Gingerbrute, number 2, at the Teferi here. Knock it down. Get them to 2. I'll tell you, Mutavault just absolutely an all-star in this format. We already knew that, but heck, it is coming through in these games right now. But all right, Gingerbrute taking down Teferi, and our opponent at that all-important 5 life means they're dead to any Shrapnel Blast. They're dead to any of our artifact buff spells, like, for instance, this Skilled Animator right here that can turn one of these Ghostfire Blades into a 5/5, or the Gingerbrute, and we have a Mutavault. This is a difficult situation for my blue-white opponent, going down to 3 life with 3 cards in hand, trying to claw their way back into this one here. Passing the turn back is certainly an interesting decision. And our next card's a Gingerbrute. So we can mill that with this Emry, which will cost 1 mana. What's the play here? This is tough, honestly. This is not an easy position. Even with my opponent at 3 life, seems like it should be, but I don't know what they have. And I don't know what I want to do. With only 3 lands in play, I can play Emry for 1, fire up the Mutavault attack. That is lethal. Any spell from our opponent means that they get us, but hey, then we have an Emry. Or I play the Skilled Animator, turn the Ghostfire Blade into a 5/5. That I don't think that that's the play. But other than that, the play can only be to play a Stonecoil Serpent. And none of that feels particularly good. I could also just try to put a Ghostfire Blade on the Gingerbrute and fire up the Mutavault. That seems like the worst of all the plays. So I think the play is going to be, first thing first, And I think we want to value attacking. So I'm going to go with the Mutavault line here. And if it's something like Settle the Wreckage, then I really don't want to have gone for this Ghostfire Blade. So I'm just going to content myself with swinging for lethal, presenting lethal attackers, and making my opponent's 3 cards answer them in one way or another. And I mean, drawing the Gingerbrute off the top, not even the worst thing right here. Let's see what the big play from our opponent is to not die. But yeah, at 3 life, Gingerbrute off the top of our deck. Honestly, that might be a better play than the Emry anyways, because it's a hasty threat that can kill them with one of these Ghostfire Blades. So let's see what happens. It's a Shark Typhoon. Well, this is a good play for my opponent because... Alright, so I need to actually think here. I can make this unblockable. I can make it so that it cannot be blocked by this Shark token. Then the Shark token is actually forced into chump blocking unless my opponent has another removal spell. It's that or trade the Gingerbrute. Yeah, I think we're just supposed to trade. We have to leverage the cards in our hand and putting pressure on board, and it's great that my opponent's life total is dwindling here, but I think that we have to just kind of keep on the straight and narrow. And, you know, for what it's worth, given that we know we have Gingerbrute on top of our deck thanks to that Teferi Tuck, and Gingerbrute in this circumstance is actually good, I don't even think I'm going to play the Emry. I think I'm just going to play a silly Stonecoil Serpent for 1 on the basis that it has protection for multicolored and trample and can pick up a Ghostfire Blade. We have a second one in our hand. That doesn't even seem like a problem going for this. Now, opponent could have something like the Absorb here. They do. In which case, I want to take a note here before we move on. If I had gone for this pre-combat, and I can be pretty bad about playing my spells pre-combat, but generally you should play them post-combat, and this is why. If I'd gone for the Stonecoil Serpent pre-combat, my opponent would have absorbed it, and then not been forced to use that Shark Typhoon token to block, giving them more options. But because we just attacked first before even using the stack, they had to make the block to not die, and then the Absorb comes onto an empty board where we still have access to a Mutavault, and a hasty threat coming off the top of our deck. So it's a main phase dig through time. This game, though, not over by a long shot, especially now our opponent digging through their deck here, and we're not drawing a land. So, like I said, this game would have been really easy if we could have found some more lands, but it's also possible that we might be able to just sort of surprise gank our opponent here with this Skilled Animator, turning one of these Ghostfire Blades into a 5/5, depending on what they do. So we'll see. They might get greedy and tap out, but instead it looks like they're just going to... looks like they're just going to hold up a counterspell. Once again, we have options. I can go for a lethal play right here. I can turn this into a colorless creature. I can put the Ghostfire Blade on it, and I can swing for 4. If we think our opponent has Absorb, that's the play. If we think they have something like Azorius Charm, we get blown out. So what do we think's more likely? Absorb or Azorius Charm? I see 2 Azorius Charms in the graveyard, or the exile now, and 2 Absorbs. There's really no telling. Which one's worse for us? How about that? That's a way to look at it. What happens if I mean, I guess if I go for the Skilled Animator here and our opponent has Absorb, we're legitimately in trouble. If I go for the Gingerbrute and they have Absorb, we're not quite so bad off. However, the Gingerbrute is not lethal. Even with a... Actually, is lethal with a Ghostfire Blade, so we can put both of them on it. Still kind of leaves us in the same boat if they have Azorius Charm, though. Except that the Azorius Charm hit our Gingerbrute and our Mutavault. Alright, I'll buy that. Alright, this is the line we're going to go for. And actually, this is still kind of scary for our opponent if they do have a an Absorb here. We get to fire the Mutavault up, put him back down to 5, which is still our magic number. You know, they could think they finally have stabilized, do something like play a big Teferi plus that thing, and then we go for the Skilled Animator, Ghostfire Blade, taking them down to 0. This sideboarded game has had some action, that's for sure. It was a neutralize. Okay. Interesting. If I had a land, this game would be over. Instead, I guess we're going to hit him for 2. Well, neutralize is not absorb, and that worked to our favor there because This is a circumstance where their life total is very important. But like I said, we are far from out of the woods here. It doesn't. This game is at a razor's edge, right? This either we're going to get our attack in that ends the game, or our opponent is just going to turn the corner and just pull away from us, to which we can never catch up. That's generally how this goes. All depends on what they're looking at. Let's see what they're tapping mana for here in their main phase. This game would have been so easy with a land. Wow, it's another dig through time, another main phase dig through time. Because they're just dead to the Mutavault on board, which means they're definitely going to be dead to the cards in our hand. If we just get a land, that would help, I think. Although at this point, maybe not. Because 5 mana is what we would need to activate and play Skilled Animator. The Castle Ardenvale and a pass. Well, I guess we're in the same circumstance we're just constantly in. There's a Bomat Courier. I'm going to save that Bomat Courier for what it's worth. Although I say that, I could play the Bomat, equip the Ghostfire Blade to it. That way, if it is Azorius Charm, it doesn't hit our Mutavault. That's actually probably a better play here. Because then I can still play the Emry afterwards, should they have something. I think this is actually a smarter line than just activating the Mutavault would be. Because if they have nothing, we're going to win the game anyways. But if they do have something, if they have that Azorius Charm that gets us, well, this allows us to play around it a little bit. That said, move to combat and see what happens. And honestly, it's not like putting the Bomat Courier on top of my deck is that good for my opponent, unless they do it in response to this ability, which would work. It would actually exile it to itself. But instead, it's a seal away from our opponent. All right, this game continues. Bomat has been exiled. Emry has joined the party. Now, this is a difficult card for my opponent to beat on all kinds of axes. Not only is it a 1/2 that we can actually activate to put a Ghostfire Blade on at this point, should we want to kill our opponent, it also allows us to cast all of these crazy cards from our graveyard. Look at that. That says choose target artifact card, not CMC 3 or less or something like that. You might see any artifact card in your graveyard. We can cast it this turn. That includes the Gingerbrutes. It includes the Stonecoil Serpent, the Hope of Ghirapur. It's very difficult for our opponent to win the game if this Emry sticks around. And they're at 2 life. Wild Slash is not in our deck, but we're now 21 cards into our deck. 4 Shrapnel Blast are, and we have plenty of artifacts for fodder. Shrapnel Blast is an instant, by the way. So, really difficult circumstance for our opponent here. Now, they do have the Castle Ardenvale open, so they could go pretty deep here making tokens to block. No trample. And instead, I told you it was a problem for him. It's a supreme verdict to answer an Emry. That is the kind of difficult position we get to put our opponent in. Now, let's see what our deck has to serve up. That's a Shrapnel Blast. So, oh gosh. What to do? I think we fire up the Mutavault and attack. If we're just going to keep on this line until our opponent gives us a reason not to. They can activate the castle, though. Alright, hold up. I actually miscounted. I actually thought they were 1 short of doing this. So, this is what they would do. They would activate the castle. Do we think they have an absorb or a counterspell? That's a question. Because I could basically time walk them by attacking with this, but you know, maybe that's not the line. Maybe we just pass the turn. We let our opponent walk into it. Because they're going to activate Castle Ardenvale, and we're going to win the game. This is these big brain plays, you know. I get a little bit there. I move to combat. I turn my Mutavault into a creature. Then I realize the right play. That's why it's called Punting Pioneer. But we are punting our way straight to victory because that is 5 damage to our opponent's face. They have lost. We took it down. That was an incredible game and honestly an incredible match. And frankly, I feel pretty good about that one. I played around the things we thought our opponent could have, and that led us to winning the game. They even had them. That felt good. You know, this is what Magic does to you. You play the game forever. I've played this game for like 12, 13 years at this point. And sometimes you have great games, you win. Sometimes you have terrible games and you lose. But very do you actually feel like you played well and it mattered? And that is one of the most satisfying things in Magic. So, cue the YouTube comments telling me all the mistakes I actually made in the match. But either way, that one still felt good and was a lot of fun. Let's see if we can finish things off with one more win. All right, can we go 3-4-3 with Izzet Ensoul? This looks like a pretty good hand to me. Our opponent on some kind of energy strategy over there. The classic Attune with Ether, the terror of a standard format if you were playing back then. This looks like a pretty decent hand for us, though, I gotta say. We're gonna need another land here to really start popping off, but this looks pretty okay to me. The Gingerbrute, the Bomat Courier. We've got some annoying threats for our opponent to deal with while they ramp up to whatever they're doing with their energy here. I don't even know. Aetherworks Marvel, is that even a legal card in this format? Okay. Never had it played against me. Let's see what's up. It is a Voltaic Brawler. What standard could have been back then if the other energy cards weren't so broken? You might have attacked with energy. This is actually a good card. It's a 3/2 for 2. Whenever in this battlefield you get 2 energy, when it attacks, you can pay an energy. It's +1 in trample. That's a 4/3 trample for 2. A really powerful card, as a matter of fact. Unfortunately for our opponent, we have kind of a plethora of ways to deal with it here. Is this going to make me play the game a little slower, a little differently? And as a result, I'm just going to play this 2/2 Stonecoil Serpent that won't be big enough if our opponent spends energy to trade with this, but Stonecoil Serpent randomly does have protection for multicolored. So while the trample will get through, my opponent will have to assign lethal here, but then can trample through. It at least makes him spend the energy to do it. So we're going to tax the energy a little bit, and we still have another Stonecoil Serpent for later, and as a result, opponent not even attacking. Rhythm of the Wild here, huh? Here's a land. The land was the key draw for us there. Our opponent actually doing some powerful stuff here, I think. Rhythm of the Wild is certainly a powerful card. Think about the decks we've played so far. Would have crushed them. Now we just got to figure out what to do with our Skilled Animator here. I think I'm gonna go in on this Bomat Courier, frankly. And then let's attack. Now I've changed my tune on blocking. Let's swing. All they can do is chump block the Bomat. They're going to take 2 from the Stonecoil because it has protection. Just like that, they're down to 12, and now racing just, frankly, looks pretty bad for them. Certainly maybe doable with Riot on their creature spells, but that was a big hit. That was a big swing. We have the Shrapnel Blast in hand. The third land was clutch. So, see where things go from here. We only have to work in another 7 points of damage one way or another, and then Shrapnel Blast will be able to go the distance. Let's see what they want to do. Attack with... Yeah, they're going to have to keep the Voltaic Brawler back on defense. That is just absolutely not where they want to be. And I have to say, Shadowspear, kind of an interesting draw here. Because here's what I'm... here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that my opponent is going to kill our Skilled Animator in combat, turning this into a 1/1, and they're going to block. So what I'm thinking about doing is putting a Shadowspear on this so that it will be swinging as a 6/6, but even if they have removal for the Skilled Animator, it'll be a 2/2 and trade with this. That would basically force them to use their removal on the Bomat, and then we have 1 mana left open to do something else. So, or I guess we don't, because this would take everything. It's 2 to equip. That line works if I go for the Ghostfire Blade. I can play this game in a lot of different ways, honestly. I could just... This is tough. Maybe the Bomat wasn't the right choice. I wanted to swing for the max amount of damage last turn, but now I am kind of in a little bit of a pickle as to what to do here, because I don't want to lose my Bomat to a removal spell on my Skilled Animator. So is an attack the right play here? Do I just swing with the Stonecoil Serpent? Do I fire with the Mutavault, swing with everything? There are just so many options available to us. Here's what I'm thinking, though. I'm thinking I'm going to play the Ghostfire Blade. And I'll put the Ghostfire Blade on my Bomat Courier. Now, if my opponent uses removal on the Bomat Courier, honestly, so be it. In that case, they'd still be taking 2 damage. We'd still be getting in what we want. But now if they were to use that removal on the Skilled Animator, for instance, we still have a 3/3 Bomat Courier, and that is exactly what's happening. So, here you go. Harness Lightning on the Skilled Animator. They're going to get 3 energy, immediately use it. It's a weird, scalable, actually, Lightning Strike, but only for creatures. Interesting card. Energy was cool designs outside of being broken. But this is why we did this. So now our Bomat is a 3/3. It's a trade with the Voltaic Brawler if they want to do that. And should they choose to do that, well, I still have a Gingerbrute to follow up that we then get to equip with all this different stuff. I don't think I want to turn these 4 cards into these 3 cards, some of which are under and some underneath this Ghost. So we've mutated onto the Ghostfire Blade, I guess. But we'll take the trade here, get in for 2. And now we have another threat to follow up with. So, yeah, I think this worked out for us. That definitely required some thinking, but I think that was probably the best outcome. We got the trade where we would have lost our creature otherwise. We were able to get in some points of damage. We end with another creature on the board, an evasive one that we can put this Ghostfire Blade onto. That worked out well for us, and it's not a given that it was going to. So now we have some more choices. I think I'm just going to put the Ghostfire Blade on the Gingerbrute and swing. Because this is 5 damage. This is lethal if our opponent takes it with the Shrapnel Blast in our hand. So let's move to combat and see what happens. Stonecoil Serpent's for days up in here. And they're just going to take it. Well, they don't know it, but that was the death knell. I'm just going to pass the turn back. I'm not slow rolling my opponent, but I don't know what they're playing. So I'm going to wait for them to give me a window to kill them with the Shrapnel Blast so that we leave nothing to chance. And here we go. The Hydra is good enough for me. I will Shrapnel Blast away. I guess the Stonecoil Serpent. I don't think it particularly matters here unless they're going to play Life Goes On. They're not. We took it down over the energy deck. But outside of these Aether Gusts, I'm not too sure what I have for this one. I mean, our deck seems pretty okay here, frankly. Hope of Ghirapur seem medium. The Stubborn Denials are also pretty medium, but they're okay. Spell Pierce, Abrades. I mean, all these cards seem good in different circumstances. That's the thing. I'll be honest, I'm not really positive how we want to play against our opponent. I kind of feel like an Aethersphere Harvester might actually just be good, though. You know what? This is actually probably the matchup for Shadowspear is worth playing. I'm gonna cut a Bomat Courier, especially on the draw. They're the worst of the 1-drops when your opponent is playing creatures and can block anyways. The more fair Magic your opponent is playing, the worse Bomat Courier is. I guess that's probably a good way to put that, but alright, let's jump into game 2 here. See if we can take it down. Back on the draw. And a weird hand if I've ever seen one. What do we think our opponent has? That's what you ask yourself when you see this hand. And you know what? Yeah, we've already won a couple matches. We're up a game. Let's see what happens. Frankly, I don't know a ton about this Izzet Ensoul deck. I actually did play it a fair amount back in Standard, so I am kind of familiar with some of the broader lines of the deck. But here in Pioneer, I don't know if you keep a hand like this. Now, obviously, we're going to look out, draw the Gingerbrute, and it's going to look a lot better. But the idea is between the Wild Slash, if our opponent has the same 2-drop they had, the Wild Slash will get it. The Stubborn Denial will get something like a Rhythm of the Wild or a Planeswalker. And the Shadowspear makes any creature we eventually draw be good, and there's a creature. So, a Long Tusk Cub. Okay. Red-Green Energy Beatdown. Very much a real deck, actually, when they're on the front foot. But don't know that they're going to be able to get on the front foot against us here. And so they can actually do this at any time to turn this into a 3/3. You see, I mean, it's a 3/3 for 2 that can scale up. Armagoyf, here we come. I think this is pretty straightforward. A little slow for us, but this is where we're at. I mean, this is going to be hard. This Long Tusk Cub is just going to be pretty annoying to beat. That said, 3 Wild Slashes, so let's just try to remove all our opponent's creatures. With any luck, they'll go for this here. They did not. They played well, so... And now they're going to go up to 4 energy, making this even more of a nightmare to take out. Maybe we'll be able to race it. Yeah, we could have tried to do 2 damage to it, and they would have just paid the energy and turned it into a 3/3. So, kind of a difficult for us to deal with here. No blocks. The Shadowspear actually helps us race, too. I mean, provided this thing doesn't just get enormously out of control, and frankly, it might. Already up to 6 energy. I guess I could use this to kill it for sure. Where we're at? Well, could be. Let's equip. With the lifelink on it, we're doing okay here. The reality is I probably am going to have to Shrapnel Blast this thing next turn. And even then, it might not be enough. I really want to just race it, though. What I would love is for, you know, us not to get abraded, basically. However, I can at least Stubborn Denial the Abrade, so that's not so bad. The old Force Spike coming in handy right here. No Abrades today, friend. Now, this is what I like to see, then. That was very mana efficient for us. We're going to end this turn at 18 life. Our opponent's going to have 17 life. This is a race we might be able to win, provided we're sitting on, 11 points of burn in our hand. Now, this Long Tusk Cub's going to get pretty big. It's like a 3-turn clock all by itself. Tarmogoyf, not that far off as a comparison at this point. But we might be able to race it. Let's see what they do. And they're going to go for it. Okay. It's a 4/4. We're down to 14. But the thing is, the Gingerbrute, they're going to have to find removal for the Gingerbrute. More removal. Because the Gingerbrute can just go through. That is a pummeler. Wow. Okay. Electrostatic pummeler. When it is a battlefield, you get 3 energy. They're up to 7. Pay 3 energy. Gets +X until the turn. Where X is its power. So the way that would work is they pay 3 energy. Get +X. It become a 2/2. Then they pay 3 more energy, become a 4/4, and so on. You give this thing double strike, and you got yourself a standard deck back in the day. So, that said, this might work out for us swinging with this Gingerbrute here, though. I could also use a Skilled Animator, turn it into a 5/5. Then we're getting in for 6 damage, putting them at 11. Wait, don't we have 11 points of burn? I have a plan. It even has Trample, so our opponent's not going to want to block here. All that said, we could still just die. I mean, we could actually just lose the game when we pass the turn here, despite being at 20 life and having lethal when we don't actually have lethal when we untap. That's one of the things that's gonna matter here. Cindervines, though, not so problematic. It's the double strike trample on the electrostatic pummeler and then dumping all their energy into it that I'm a little more concerned about than a Cindervines at this point of the game, because we have our opponent where we need our opponent at 11 life. That's lethal if we get 2 more turns with the cards in our hand. I have my chump block ready to go here with this Skilled Animator, so we're going to force them to blow this thing up at some point. I wish I had the mana to do this, but even if we hit a land, we're going to need an additional turn. So, with that said, I could play Emry this turn and still have the Shrapnel Blast open. I have to start with the Emry before the Cindervines gets us. We don't have the discount. I hope this Emry doesn't matter. I hope we just win this game with this burn, but we'll see what happens. All right, Gingerbrute getting in there. I mean, if my opponent is silly and just took 6 here, the game's actually over. We'll just Shrapnel Blast them to death. And from their perspective, that might happen. And as a matter of fact, surely. All right, here we go. Cindervines on the Gingerbrute. They decide that's going to be the problem. And that works for me because I'm going to Shrapnel Blast you, sacrificing the Gingerbrute. I believe this keeps us from taking 2 damage from the Cindervines. It did. And here you go. We have 2 chump blockers. Our opponent has 1 card in hand, all the energy in the world, but I don't think they have 14 points of damage past our blockers, which is what they need, because we're going to go red from Spire of Industry, triple Wild Slash to the face for the victory. I'll tell you, how about the games we got in with this deck this week? This was nutty, frankly. This burn you out. I mean, look, our opponent was at 17, I think. I said, I'm going to swing and put him in 11, and then the game is over. And that's what happened here. Our opponent in complete control of the board and completely dead on board. Again, I don't think they can gain life here. I'm just going to go for it. I am going to get hit by this Cindervine, so I'm just going to go for it and hope that their last card doesn't gain them life somehow. Alright, that one puts them to 4. Well, I say that. Should I just be using my Shrapnel Blast instead here? I guess the Shrapnel Blast saves us, if something goes terribly wrong here, the Shrapnel Blast saves us one hit from the Cindervine so that we're less likely to die, I guess. We also don't have to pay a life, however, it doesn't matter. We got there 3-0 with Izzet Ensoul, everybody. Welcome to New Pioneer. This was a wild deck that we played, and it was a fun one, and it was a good one, everybody. That was awesome. Let's go take a look at the deck here now. Let's see what post-match. I mean, what would I say about this deck? Frankly, nothing. This deck was perfect. Maybe you can move this Shadowspear to the sideboard. It was a little more situational. But I don't know what you'd get in the main deck. I don't think you want a third Emry, maybe the 4th Wild Slash or something. But honestly, this deck felt pretty good to me. I think you could probably play 21 lands instead of 22. But I think 22 is safer, and honestly, why wouldn't you? They double as crazy good stuff anyways. So this was a fun one this week. I enjoyed this deck. This might be something I think about picking up in Pioneer. That was a different playstyle, that's for sure. A unique type of brew and a successful one. So if you're looking for something different in Pioneer, look no further, everybody. Until next week, I'm Corbin Hosler. Thank you so much for watching, everybody.